Starting with an older Spider-Man here, um, kind of on a small screen, so I don't have a lot of room to move around. It's kind of a problem. So first off, just setting up to work with the interface for rigging. First off, just by default, you're in modeling, so you want to set yourself up with rigging. So you can grab any of the skeleton or those tools up at the top on the menu. Also, you might want to consider in the class we've been um, picking the polygons as the shelf menu, but you could also go to the rigging for the shelf menu there. Um, been trying to just point those out when they're there. So furthermore, you can see that I'm not actually quite using the full screen, and it's, I get a little bit more space if I hit my green button. It takes up just a little bit more of the screen. If I want my menus, I can always grab them there. Um, Next, I really don't need to see 4View. In this case, I really want to see the perspective outliner view. So I'm going to click on perspective outliner view. This gives me a good view here. I can move around in the perspective, and if I want to change views, I'm holding spacebar and going over to any of the one views. So I'm holding spacebar and clicking on the center Maya, clicking down, left click, and going over to pick the different views. So if I want right view, for instance, this is how I want to start from the right view. Okay. Lastly, some of the things I could do, because this is such a small screen, this time slider and this the range of the time slider, those both are really not really useful for me. I'm not really animating. So if I right click here, I can actually go and check off what I don't want to see. So I could do the time slider. I can get rid of the range slider. Now, actually, the shelf is actually pretty big too, and if I'm not actually using the shelf, so that's kind of my point about the shelf, is that it does take up a lot of room, and I can actually access all that stuff up here. So it does open up a lot more room for me to work. So I'm going to kind of keep it like this just so I have a little more space to work with. I think that's it for setting up the space to work in. You'll see that really the only thing I have right now is just Spider-Man, and that's a little bit different in the class, but that shouldn't throw you off too much. So basically, we're going to start with the leg and work our way through. Let's see if I come to a convenient stopping spot. I'll just do that. So first off, we'll go to skeleton and we'll create joints. Just remember to click away from where anything and drag to where you want. I find that to be a little bit more useful. It's a little bit high. It's an older model, not really finished, but good enough for the rigging anyway. So basically the setup we're after here is somewhere along these lines. Is just following the leg down, and you're going to end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different balls that are joints. And the one thing to really watch out for is that you're getting that angle there. That's really critical. You create an angle so it's not a straight leg. If you don't like how you did it, just get the tool one more time, get the skeleton tool, delete what you had, and create joints. And again, I think it's faster to actually just lay them out the way you want. And again, remember, click and drag. I think is faster, easier, and more better. Kind of long leg here, like we discussed in class. So go right onto the ankle, to the ball. And this last one, I actually hold shift, which means it constrains the motion of the joint. It kind of just keeps it straight from that last one. Just going to come right out to the toe there. And when I'm done, I hit return and accepts the joints. If you press once on this positive sign up here on the joint, you'll see in the outliner that it just opens up one. If you hold shift and click on that, it opens up the whole thing. And then once you've done that once, you'll see that you just need to click on it and it opens the whole entire thing. I'm going to rename these. This one is hip JNT, knee JNT, ankle, JNT. And I'm not putting the underscores, it's doing that for me just by pressing space, so remember that. Ball, JNT. And I'm arrowing down as well and hitting enter to enter name and then naming it. And this would be toe, JNT. And then hitting return, and that accepts the change. It's kind of nice. That's kind of new, and for me at least, 2014 didn't do that. Okay, those are named. Now, the thing that we want to make sure that we do before we get too much further is change our view so that we're actually looking in perspective again. So I want to just spacebar, click, left click, go to perspective view, change my view, and take a look. You can see the object or the joints are actually in the center of the character, and we want to move them over to the side. I'm going to spacebar, left click, go to front view. Again, it kind of takes people some time to get used to that, but I think once you do get used to it, it really is nice. So I'm just going to use my move tool and move the joints over. And I would err maybe on the hip more than anything, but as lining up. The knee, the foot, they're all over. It's kind of a bent leg, but you're not going to hit it perfectly. It's better to go straight, I think, just in the beginning. Bent joints are really hard to rig, especially with IK handles, so I would suggest keeping things straight. You can always bend things out after everything's rigged and match your character, but you should have probably modeled straight would be better. So now that's in good position, so spacebar, left click, perspective view, so I can see the perspective view. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now we'll go to IK handles. Create IK handle. I do want the options box so that I can change between here single chain or RP. I want to start with my RP. A little tough in here. Let's turn off the channel box so we have a little more space to see. I want to start on the hip joint and then go to the ankle joint. And you get this white triangle on the top, and that means that you have a twist value and that your knee will actually rotate. If you don't have a white triangle in there, you did not get an RP solver, you used an SC solver, you'll need to delete the IK handle or undo and do it one more time with the RP solver. I'll just name them as I go to help, but this one's called ankle space IK, puts the underscore there for me. I'm just going to grab a tool again. You can see it's over here, so I can press that. That's the last tool used. I could go back up into skeleton, create IK handle. There's multiple ways to get to that. Now, I changed it to RP solver, but now we're no longer worrying about the twist because we're going to do the lower part of the foot. So I just really need single chain solver. I'm going to be clicking on the ankle joint, and then I'm going to click on the ball joint. Get a new IK handle, and this one doesn't go over multiple joints. It just goes from the length of one joint, and really it's just a connector between the joint and all the other things we're gonna make with this. And you can see that the IKs become they're separated from the joints. They aren't really in the hierarchy of the joint, which makes it useful to me because I don't have to disrupt my IK, my joints to get to these other parts. So I can interact with the joints without actually touching the joints, which makes that a lot better. Last one, I'm going to do IK handle. So clicking on the button IK handle, click on the ball joint, click on the toe. Again, it just goes across one joint, and this one will be called toe IK. Okay. So that sets us up pretty well to create up now the hierarchy for the foot control. And remember, the whole point of all this stuff is that you want to set this up for an animator to work so that they can work without looking at joints. You're going to want to be looking at your character solid, and they're going to not be wanting to look at wireframe or select joints or things like that. So we're creating things for them to work outside of the character. So these are controls is what we're building now. So this is the joints. Now we're building control. Okay. Remember in the marionette we talked about this. These would be the strings. on that marionette doll, or kind of puppeter kind of idea, if that makes sense to anyone. So what we did is we did a series of groupings. So the first grouping was toe and ball. That's Command G, or edit group. Makes a group. The group's name is toe tap. The ankle IK is grouped to itself, and that really kind of threw people off. I'm doing Command G to group that, Command G. Grouping something to itself is always throws students off. They feel like, how is that possible? This is called heel lift. Clearly it's possible, I just did it. And it's a real common way of making things in this kind of environment. So gonna have to get used to it, essentially. So now I'm going to select the two things. You can see that both of them have IK handles inside of them. I don't need them open or to close them, but it does usually make it a little easier to make the selection. So I'm just going to select both of them now. Do Command G for group. So those two are grouped inside of it. And this one's called ball swivel. So essentially each one of these groupings is going to give me a different axis to rotate upon, and it gives me a logical progression, so that some things will rotate everything and some things will rotate only different parts. So again, I could open the whole thing, and I kind of show this in class. People tend to feel more comfortable when they see things are actually inside of stuff, but it is actually easier just to work from ball swivel just straight without anything opened and just group it to itself again. This is now called toe, oops, didn't have it selected, toe peel. And the last one is heel pivot, so I do Command G, group it to itself again. This one's called heel pivot. Turn. Now if I open up the whole thing, I hold Shift and click on the whole thing, you can see this is the hierarchy we've created. And that hierarchy right there is going to give us the ability to control the foot in a logical way. So we can do walk cycles, we can do lots of different things with this. Okay, pretty powerful, really useful way of doing this. Pretty simplistic too. If you look online, you'll see a lot of different methods for this, but this is a nice one. I think it's pretty simple and easy to work with. It's definitely a good beginner setup. Okay, so those are all set up. So next is to create the actual object everything sits inside of here. So we actually have to create something that an animator would have outside of the character that we could click on that would define it as the foot. And so we need to create something, an actual type of object. We don't want it to be a polygonal object because that's solid and they won't be able to see through that. So we need to create some sort of like curvature, curve that will go around that. So we use curves for that. Let's close up this tool settings so we can see that. Maximize this window by just tapping spacebar, so we're just looking at perspective view. Now, normally I would use the shelf in the class, but you can see that I can also do polygon primitive. I'm just going to pick a cube and then just move this out to the side there so it's visible. I'll hit the key F to center myself on the view. And now we're going to create a curve, and I just tend to always pick the EV curve tool. You can use either one really. I'm going to click on the options box. You do need the options box no matter what. And a lot of people kind of forget this particular aspect right here, is that if you click with it right now and you start making things, you'll see it starts to curve on you. And it's always the third one because it's at 3 cubic, right? What you want to do is make sure that you have 1 linear, okay? And you'll see that it just stays straight that way. It stays linear, okay? I'm getting rid of them by hitting delete, but you can also do Z for undo. So it's either delete or undo, which is kind of nice. It leaves the tool open, so the tool's still available to me. The way I'm snapping these is I'm holding the key V, as in Victor. So I'm holding down the key V. I'm holding it down with my left hand. The V is in Victor. Holding it down. I'm going to take my left mouse click and just click near a corner. I'm just going to continue to hold V down. I'm just not going to let go of V until I rotate the view. So just holding V down, I'm just going to focus on going around the squares. And that means I'm going to have to go over lines. Okay, so here I'm going to go over this line. Now I'm going to make new line. New line. This is also new line, but now I need to get back onto the other side. I can't cross over. It kind of makes weird shapes. We want to keep the cubeness of it. So I'm just going to pick this way. It could go this way too. See, it shows me that. I'm letting go of V so that I can hold Alt and rotate my view around to the other side. And a lot of people stop like here and do this side, and then I have to rotate. I like to rotate so I see both sides, so I just have to do one rotation. The yellow X shows the last point of the line I'm creating, so the logical next point would be here. So I'm pressing V as in Victor again, so I'm snapping to points. Notice that the magnet sort of turns on when I hold V. Just going to, again, focused on the sides, not really thinking about the tops. That seems to help people. So that actually did the whole thing. I'm just going to come back over that line and then just finish out over here. And so when I hit return, I should get a full-on curve. What I'll do is I'll click in the center here, which selects the cube that we used to make this. I'll just kind of move it out of the way. And you can see that here's my curve that I created, which is a perfect cube, and there's no lines going through the center like a diagonal or anything, and all the pieces are there. So that's what we're after for that cube. And this cube is going to be our cube that we use throughout the whole process. So it's pretty important that we get it built. The actual polygonal cube you can just delete. Don't really need that. And it's called curve 1. Typically what we call this is like copy curve or something. I'm going to call it copy curve. I think it makes better sense. Copy curve. And the copy curve, I just to kind of help people think, okay, you're going to always copy that. You're not actually going to, you don't want to keep making new cubes all the time. I think the cube's pretty versatile and I like it. Obviously there are other things. Some people use circles, some people use like more complex shapes. I like the cube because you can get pretty complex. It's three-dimensional, so you can see it all directions. Sometimes just a circle, it hides itself from certain axes. So I kind of like having a 3D selector for that reason. But obviously you could really use anything, but the cube works nice. So we're going to stick with that. Remember always when something is new created, just like with the groups, and we'll have to deal with this on the groups in a moment, but the pivot point is not centered on the object, so we'll need to go to Modify, Center Pivot. So now the object is centered. Okay, it doesn't really matter where this thing is. It's just going to sit out there, and we're just going to duplicate off this thing over and over and over again. Okay, so that being said, I'm just going to go back to wireframe so I can see the joints here, and I'm going to duplicate the copy curve. So edit, duplicate. Makes a new one down here called Copy Curve 1, and you can see here's the tools over here. It looks like it's just sitting on top of the other one, so usually when you make a duplicate, the duplicate will sit on the original. Basically what I want to do is select the tool from the center. Remember, that's kind of throws people off, selecting the tool. Got to pick it from the center. Now I'm going to hold down V again as in Victor, so I'm snapping again with point. And this time I can't do left mouse, because if I do left mouse, I'll actually select something else. So you'll see it just selected something. What I have to do is hold V, take my middle mouse, click down with my middle mouse, and just kind of drag till it goes to where I want it, which would be right there on that ball joint. And it's not like particularly important that it's directly on the ball joint necessarily, but it's just a nice place to snap to. And we're going to want to duplicate on the other side, so having that snap, kind of having the ball as the snap point, just makes it real consistent on both sides. So now I'm just going to scale it and make it selectable easily. Usually I try and make it a little bit bigger than the IK handles so they're easy to select. Then I usually get into right-click on the object, Control Vertex. Be careful, a lot of people just make one singular selection and then they like, wait, what happened? It's not editing, there's this extra. And that's because you made extra lines on top of each other. There's multiple control vertices sitting on top of each other. Easiest way is just select both and just, so I'm just doing a big marquee selection over everything, so it selects everything. Just work my way around here and just grab maybe the back. I like to usually just kind of simply sort of try to mimic the foot shape. It's pretty good. I could maybe do a little bit taller this way, so just kind of can be a little challenging to make the selections in this view because the IK handles tend to want to select, or the joints or something, and that looks pretty good right there. Again, working in the component mode is kind of nice because it doesn't change the pivot point, but obviously you can change the pivot point afterwards, as you'll see in just a moment. So the foot looks good. Just need to give it a name. We'll call it foot CNTL. Oops. There we go. So I'm doing CNTL for control. So that gives it a name. Now, the last thing we really need to do is I need to turn on my channel box so you can see this. Again, I'm just turning these off to give more space in the scene. Notice all the values, right? So we want to get all of these to be zeros and all of our scales to be 1. I can't type that in. I have to actually, I want it to stay what it is, but now see it itself as 0 and 1s. So the way we do this, and any time before we connect anything, when we say, okay, we're going to connect something, you always want to ask yourself, have I done freeze transformations, right? And just make sure you do that on every object so that you clear everything out and everything's cleaned, okay? Because those values can come back and they'll propagate through things inside of themselves, right? So that sets us up pretty well. The last thing we want to do is just bring the heel pivot group and put it inside of the foot control. This is actually called parenting, and you'll see parenting happen several times now, and there's lots of ways to actually parent. One of the ways is within this view right here in the outliners, I can just click middle mouse and drag onto the heel pivot onto the foot control, and you can see now the foot control is actually foot control, heel pivot, and it's holding everything now. So when I grab this foot control, already I have the ability to move the leg, right? And I can actually, move this around pretty well. You can see how it might move as a leg, right? So that's already set up just by virtue of that. And you can see the animator can easily select this. It's outside the geometry and selectable. So now what we need to do is add the attributes to the foot control. So what I've been doing is getting the attributes from the edit in the channel box, but there's also up in, modify, you can do add attribute. So there's lots of ways to go to get the tools and boxes and whatnot. Been lately working with the channel box more than anything. So in class what we did is first of all, we did a foot, actually did that in caps, foot control, and I actually just spelled it out. I said override nice name, and I said underscore like 4 times, and then on the back side underscore like 4 times. And then we did displayable, and basically what this did is it just gives us kind of a break between scale, the object attributes and our new attributes we're creating. Just say add, and it's just like a break is all it does by making displayable. The rest of these all are going to be the same, just names, keyable. We're not going to do any minimums, maximums. We're just going to keep the default as 0. So basically all we're doing is it's just going to basically put names in here for a little while. Now the order is basically just going to follow this order right here. So when you heel pivot, toe, balls, like that. There is an extra one that we're going to add that's between here. It's called heel swivel. We actually don't need a group for it because the heel pivot will work for that, but it's not necessary to create a group because we already have it, but we do need an attribute to control it, so we need an extra attribute. So we'll end up with an actual total of 6 attributes in terms of the ball swivels and all those things. And we're going to add another one called foot roll. So here they go. So first one, again, the order isn't really important, but I'm trying to keep it matching as much as possible what we have here. So first one's heel. This one actually, in this view, you do have to put the underscore, which is a little frustrating because I wish they'd sort of make that the same everywhere, but this is heel pivot. And I'm going to say add. And now this is the one that we don't have a group for, but it's going to be directly underneath it. And we're going to call this one heel swivel. Say add. And you can see that they're starting to come up. And you can see the difference that the one was just the displayable, doesn't have the ability to change the value, but these ones do. Next one is toe peel. Say add. Next one is ball swivel. And they are showing up caps over here too. Notice that I'm not actually typing in caps, but they are coming in capped. So do notice that that's actually happening. So that's ball swivel, toe tap. I think it's important to recognize that because when you do, if you ever attach to these in any way, that you're not actually capping them. Toe tap. Next one's heel lift. Put a space there. Probably did that on one or I've got pretty good, doing pretty well on that. Heel lift, we'll add that. And then that actually covers all of the foot controls as individual pieces, but we're going to add one more that's going to be called foot roll. And for the 160 class, we haven't actually taken advantage of the foot roll yet. We're still using just the connections that we have made in class, but the foot roll is definitely being used in the 161 class, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in this tutorial. So we're done now. We have all of the things that we're looking for here, and I can just go ahead and close this window, so I don't need that anymore. So that's called adding attributes, and essentially these are variables, and we're going to utilize these variables in the same way you would use them in algebra. And you know, the more that you understand algebra, the maybe the more sense this can make to you. But I don't think it's important to know math. But if you don't like math, it's kind of cool because you're doing it, and you know, you might even enjoy it, and that would be a different experience for some people. So that sets that up. The next step is really to go back through all of our heel pivots, and you'll notice that all of those pivot points are actually sitting up at the center. So I did have to change the pivot point of this object, if you recall, it was sitting way off to the side. These groups do the same thing. All their pivot points are happening at the point here at the origin. We need to get them down into respective areas. So in order to do this, if you're on a PC, you'd press the insert key. If you're on an Apple computer, you would press the home key. Now that's just one press. That's a one press, not hold. Just pressing down, and you can see the icon changes to this little, it's got to rotate and some moves, and the center selected. This one's actually on the heel. So I need to actually get a little bit closer. I'll try and make it so you can see them. I'm going to hold down V as in Victor. So again, I'm snapping. I'm going to use the middle mouse, and I'm going to drag on the heel. So this throws a lot of people off. They tend to really want to put this on the ankle. But we actually want to rotate from the heel, and that hopefully will make more sense to you later. And again, if you make other characters and use the rig, you might actually end up wanting to move these pivots to make more sense to the foot that you're working with. So the pivots really are important, but they're movable at any time, totally editable. You can make these wrong and fix them later. It's not that much of an issue, but do try and get them into place, right? In fact, all of this is really quite resilient. You can really break all this stuff pretty hardcore and not really have a problem. So Next one's toe peel. As you can see, it's way up at the top. I'm going to hold V. Notice that by default, I don't know what's going on with my 2016, but it keeps letting go of the center of that selection every time you do this, which is really pretty annoying. It seems to be only in the pivot point when you're moving pivot points. So this one goes on the toe, and actually, in all actuality, it probably really should be like more like towards, just like we did with the keel, that it actually should be probably more like that on the toe, which is okay. You know, I'll just leave it there. But oftentimes in class, I just snap it to the ball joint. Now that's those two. Those two are pretty specific. Now the last three of these groups, remember toe IKs, we're not doing this to. It's just the toes, just the groupings that we're doing this to. Okay, toe tap and ball swivel and heel lift all go to the same place, and this really throws people off. That again, how is it possible that three of them go in the same place? But they do. So the first one, ball swivel, again, just holding down V. Notice how it lets go of that selection in the center tool. I do have to click it to make it go in all directions. And I'll hold V and I'll middle mouse down towards the ball. I'm going to assume that's close enough. Select toe tap. Repeat the process. Ball joint. So I'm using the ball joint for all of these snappings. Okay. Now that's pretty far away. Oops, that's the wrong button. Sorry. Just going to zoom in a little bit. Just rotate there and see that looks good. Toe tap is on the ball and ball swivel is on the ball. So again, all three of those are on the ball. Throws a lot of people off, but there you have it. So press home again, so that takes me out of the pivot point, and I'm just using normal move tools now, so I'm not changing pivot points. Okay. We're getting pretty close to finishing up this side of the leg. So next step is to do the connection editor. Several ways to do this. You can have the object selected if you start. It's kind of nice. It sort of starts the process. It doesn't have to be selected. If you go to Windows, General Editor, Connection Editor. Sorry, that snap to points things looks like it's in the way here. Let me. Oh, it keeps going to that. Okay, General Editors, Connection Editor. That's what we want. Connection editor right there. Pretty cool tool, a great way to just connect things really fast, really nice. So again, these are load left and right type deals. So you're selecting something and then you're loading left. So it goes left to right. So in this case, think of the animator, like with the animators, you can click on the foot control. That's the controller. That's the thing that's doing something to something else. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways to try and think of that. At first, I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but eventually it starts making more sense. In the connection editor on the displays for both left and right, you'll see the show non-keyable. If you uncheck that, this becomes a lot easier to manage. Do the same for both sides, just so that you only see what you're actually working with. So this is kind of a little bit of a hard thing to look at, so I'm just trying to move the foot over this way. It doesn't really matter that you see that necessarily, but I just wanted you to see all the pieces at once. So now we're basically going to go through the order that we have set up here. And we're basically, when we're working with heel pivot, we'll be working for the heel pivot group. When we toe peel group, ball swivel group, toe tap group, heel lift group. The foot roll, we're not working this way. So, you know, that one is actually I'm used in a different way. So we won't be working with that. And the heel swivel, if you recall, is actually part of the heel pivot. So these two are actually going to work together. The only two that are like that. So let's go ahead and do it. I find it easiest to start by just selecting what you're going to work on. And that's not really it's not that you have to do that. I just find it easier to control what I'm doing and not lose track of what I'm doing. So I'm being kind of like real methodical about this process. But, you know, if you're not methodical and you can figure it all out, that's fine. But I like methodical method here. So I select that, which tells me I'm working on that group. What I tend to do is forget what group I'm on, and that's why I like to be methodical about it. I'm going to load the right, so I'm loading the right with this heel pivot group. Okay. I'm going to open up the rotate value. And again, I'm seeing not everything because I went to the right display and I already did that show non-keyable, right? So you just want to uncheck that so you're just seeing easy stuff. So the way this works is it's going to say the foot control is actually the object, the heel pivot is the actual attribute, from this is going to go to heel pivot, and then we're going to say rotate X. Okay. Now, if you're having a hard time remembering which direction you want to do something, go ahead and grab your rotate tool and just take a look at the object and say, okay, well, where is the object? Heel pivot is selected. Do I have a rotate tool? There we go, rotate tool. Sorry, it wasn't showing. And you can kind of see that, okay, in this case, it's going to be the red handle, and that's the way I want it to go. And again, beginners are not necessarily going to know that direction, but that's the one I want. So X is going to be always the direction for anything that isn't swivel, and I can see Y is always going to be the swivels. So there's two swivels, and those are actually going to be Y. So again, I just turn on the rotate tool just so I can see the handles and make sure which direction I want. So in this case, it's going to be X. And so I don't have to do anything more. Basically, I just connected those two things. If I don't want to connect it, I just uncheck it. And I could do Y if I wanted, or X. In this case, I want X. So now this is, again, the only one that does this. We're going to do heel swivel. Also is controlling the heel pivots rotate Y. So this will allow the person to rotate their foot from their heel. So we'll say rotate Y. So this is the only one that does this, okay? So watch out for that. So again, the way I like to do this is select toe peel. That tells me that I'm going to work on the toe peel group, and then I'm going to load right. So now I'm working with toe peel. Toe peel selected. The rotate. This is going to be X. Okay, now I'm going to do ball swivel. Select the ball swivel group. Load the right. This is ball swivel. Now swivels don't rotate X, they rotate Y. That one's done. I'm going to go toe tap. Click on the toe tap group. Reload right. Open the rotate. Rotate X. Select the heel lift group. Load the heel lift group on the right. And then go to the rotates, and this is rotate X. The foot roll we leave alone. We're going to do that with the with a set-driven key. So now, if I select my foot control, now I can just click on one of the words over here, and if I middle mouse drag, you can see the foot updates. And if I click on the toe peel, always make sure you undo or just set these back to 0 so that you can you want everything always back to 0. Ball swivel, toe tap, and heel lift. Good, looks awesome. So now we can do the set-driven key. So set-driven key, again, this is for the 161 classes, but the 160 people, if you want to try and take this on, you can definitely do so. So the set-driven key is actually not in the, it's not in the rigging portion. It's actually an animation. So when I want to do set-driven keys, I actually have to move away from rigging. So I need to go to animation, and that brings me this key portion. And here I can do. Gosh darn it, that is a little bit annoying. This here. Can you not do that? I wonder. Go away. Key. Let me go fast. Set-driven key set, so you can see that. So we're doing set-driven key set. Again, this is a loader and you know, so you're loading driver and driven now instead of left or right. So you know a lot of these work that way. You know, your one object attributes driving another object, another attribute. In this case, it's the same object, but it's one attribute driving different attributes of the same object. So it can be a little confusing, definitely. So in this case, I had my foot control was selected, so it loaded the driven. If I didn't have anything selected, it would have just had nothing here. You can always load driven again, or load driven with something else. And since it's the same thing, we're just going to load driver also to the top. So whatever happens here is going to happen here. So in this case, it's always going to be the foot roll. So and this is not going to change up here. This is always going to be the same. It's going to be the driver is going to be the foot control, is the object, and the attribute that's driving it is always going to be foot roll. Now down here, the foot control is always going to stay the same, but we're going to be switching between pivot, heel lift, and toe peel. Okay, so watch out for that. So these change, but this stays the same. Okay, so first off, we can start by setting up our uh, foot roll. We're going to make sure it's 0. And we're going to start with our heel pivot, and it's 0. So the first one we're going to click on is heel pivot. So we're saying the foot control foot roll is going to control foot control heel pivot. Okay, when everything's 0, it's going to be keyed 0. So when foot roll is 0, heel pivot will be 0. Now I'm just going to set this number to -10. And I'm going to say, okay, so when foot roll is -10, heel pivot is actually going to be something else. Okay, so when I click onto the heel pivot, sorry, not the heel pivot, the heel pivot this way, I'm going to put a number in here. So -30 is the number. -30. There we go. I don't know why I didn't take it first time. So I'm just typing in -30. So when this gets to -10, now it gets to 30. Again, if you haven't done keyframes and stuff like that, this could be really weird. Anyway, so it's just, if you're doing this for the first time, just do it. Just try and follow as best you can. But those of you that have done keyframes before, this should make more sense, and you've already done this before in different ways. So now I'm basically just going to set that foot roll back to 0, and now we're going to work on a new one. So basically, you're just setting 2 key points per grouping. So the next one is going to be the heel lift. So I'll just select the heel lift. So now the foot roll is going to control the heel lift, and again, it's at 0. So when the foot roll is at 0, we also want the heel lift to be 0. Okay. But now we're going to go the positive direction. So now we're going to go +10, and we'll say once it hits 10, then I want the heel lift to be 30. It's funny, this doesn't take the number the first time. 30, no, 30. Okay, there we go. Must be what I'm hitting there to do that. So then I get a rotation there. And 30 seem good, but the numbers, depending on your character, it could be 40. That's so on my first attempt, 40 looked good. Then in the class, 30 looked good. So you can play with these numbers. It's fine to have different numbers here. Maybe I'll stick with the 40. Well, actually, in the class we had 30, so let's just do 30. The thing to watch out for is that when you put these numbers in, students think you have to really put those numbers in specifically, but these things can change, and they should, depending on the character. So you want to watch out for that sort of thing. So when it gets to 10, the heel lift's going to hit 30. I'll press key. Again, if you don't know if you hit key, just key it a couple times. It's okay to do more than one. So again, if I click now on foot roll, if I go negative numbers, it starts to lower the heel. Then as I go into actual negative numbers, it actually comes up on the heel. And then it's kind of a cool thing going between negative and positive. You can see that you get these different rotations based on that. And you can kind of see the foot bending onto the toe. So we have one more that we want to do. So we'll just set this back to 0. And just see when I set foot roll to 0, just notice how these go to 0 because we keyed them at 0. Last one's toe peel. So again, I'm going to click on toe peel now. So these don't change up here. It's just toe peel. So foot rolls at 0. I key it. That way now, whenever the foot rolls 0, toe peel will be 0. Our next number is going to go beyond the 10. We'll go to 20. You see that it actually did rotate that because that is past 10, right? So that is kind of something that we'll fix in just a moment. So with the toe peel, I think we found 30 to be kind of the number. So we basically just use 30s for everything. But again, I just want to encourage you guys to play around with those numbers and just see what works best for you. Sometimes you can just drag, just click on the number and just drag it to what makes sense to you and then just key it. You know what I mean? You can literally do that. And 38.8 is fine. It's a little weird though, because when you're trying to do it on the other side, you'll maybe forget. So the 30s are nice because you're going to have to do this to the other side, and you may forget. If you take note or whatever, you can do that. So I set my value here. I'm at 20, so I could just set key now. And so now my toe works. So now when I click on my foot control and I go down, it goes up on his heel and then it goes up to his toe. So one of the things just to watch out for is if you're like at a high number, you can go beyond and you can go back and forth and you go, well, nothing's happening, but you're actually at 41 and we didn't set anything to happen until 20. So you'd have to come all the way down to 20 and then you'll start to actually get a value. Same with negatives, you're way up in negatives, you have to get all the way to -10 before anything will happen. So just, we could set that up to, have a maximum and minimum so you don't run into that problem. But for now, we're just going to leave those things as they are. So that does foot roll. So last thing is just setting up that foot roll so it works really well, right? So go ahead and close my set driven key. So last thing we did with foot rolls, we went to the graph editor. So perspective graph editor. And I have my foot control selected. As you can see, it's in the graph editor. I'm gonna hit F. And basically if you'll notice as we drag along on the timeline, which I don't have a timeline, I actually do it on my foot roll. So as I go on my foot roll, you can see that as I go into my ankle, it actually goes, the toe is rotating already. And you can see it's actually happening right here. So this is the actual rotation value. You can see that at 0, it's not doing anything, and then it just at 2, it's already starting to rotate. At 6, by here it's already rotating a lot. And again, with the heel lift, you can see the differences. What I want to do is I want to take this toe peel, select the last keyframe on there, and basically grab the handle for the tangency. Using the move tool, middle mouse, I'm just going to drag down and basically make this as long as I can get it. And you can see it's straightening out, and if I go too far, it actually bends below, and that's going to give me negative numbers because it's already starting to drop it. I don't want that. I don't really ever want to dip into negative numbers. I just want to go until that line wants to go past, so it's straight, and then it goes up. And you can see I'm hitting right about at 8. It's really going to start rotating, which is pretty close to 10, right, if you recall, for the ankle. So now if you look at all three, you can see that this one's actually not happening for a while, staying at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 until almost 6, right? Then there's only 4 more till 10, and at 10, it's still barely off. It's like barely moved. It's barely rotated, right? It's like maybe 6 degrees or something, where up here it's 30 degrees, right? Now I can do more here. I can actually go to the heel pivot now, right? So this is the heel pivot, or heel lift rather. I'll just show you them all while I do it though. Do the same thing. I'm just gonna grab it. Now this time I'm gonna say, okay, well, don't do anything after, right? So see, I don't want to move that one. I'm moving that one by accident. I didn't want to move that one. Let's just undo that. Let's isolate it to the heel pivot. I actually want to do the lift on the back side here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, okay, start moving right away, right? And then hit 30. And if I can hit 30 here at about 6, you can see that these two, this one stops at about here, and this one starts at about here. So I'm basically tuning a little bit here so that this one will stop, and this one will go. So it just gives it a nice thing. The heel pivot, it looks kind of nice like that. I like that attack that it has there, so I might actually do something along these lines. Or maybe the other way around, so that it starts moving fast and then it kind of slows down at the end. So now when you look at them all, you get this nice S-curve kind of deal. And these are much nicer looks. So now when I do my foot roll, let's set this back to 0. So when I do my foot roll now, you can see that as I come up, it's just only the ankle, and then boom, it hits the toe, and then the toe starts going. And there's other ways to handle this, but this is a pretty nice solution for our skill sets that we have, and it gives you a little more bendy foot and a nice look to it. Cool. Some of the last things that we would do for the foot control, maybe would be the hiding and stuff like that. But before we get too far into any of that, I'd rather kind of get everything else done. Just make sure that you always zero out everything here, so like your foot rolls at 0, so that you don't have anything that's gonna come back to bite you when you do the other side of the leg. Okay, so that's just the one side. I'm gonna stop here, I think, and then bring the leg over in another tutorial, maybe a shorter one, and then we'll just move in again, do another one on the spine, another one for the arm, and another one to connect everything. I think doing all these in once is just going to take too long. So here we go. I'm going to stop, and I'll pick you guys up later. I think. There we go. There's